It's the morning star drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the morning star drive, you know.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Tuesday, April 6th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we'll get some coronavirus updates, current news from around the world, best class ever segment with Sean Jusuck McMillan, and because it's Tuesday, we do have a word study on the book of Deuteronomy. All right, guys, how are you? Monday is over. It is in the books, and we have a new day for us to enjoy together with the Lord this week. And this is the week we got to make up our minds, right, everyone? All of us got to make up our minds to do things until the end, to not change our hearts or anything else like that. So I really hope that all of us here are making up our hearts and our minds, whether it's pre-dawn, getting into deep prayer, evangelism, training and developing yourself in any area. Let's do it together here this week on the Morning Star Drive. Keep liking and commenting. I want to hear from you guys and see how you're doing. Tonight, what's going to happen? We have a new vlog coming out. It's about more car troubles in Malaysia. Yes, if there's anything that I've done a lot, is probably a lot of car trouble. And I'm gonna have to do another confession. Last Thursday, another car problem. I had to replace the battery in the car too. Don't ask why. It's just stupidity. I'm going to tell you it's stupidity. I left the lights on all night and then nothing worked in the morning. Either way, so. Sunday edition. You guys check out the last Sunday edition with Daniel Baker from America, who's currently in Korea, half Korean, half American. Great interview. Learning about his journey into this history, but also see, he's only 17 years old, second gen, and you get to see the future of this history. And I was really, really inspired by it too. So guys, go check it out and see, what his future goals and what his life wants to be like too. Also, last night we had the Monday Zoom Bible study. It resumed. It resumed. Ha 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 ha. Very funny, not funny dad joke. Either way, so it resumed again, and I will post that later today. Maybe sometime in the early morning, maybe early afternoon, somewhere around that time, it will be posted, all right? So on this Tuesday, let's get this show started on the road. So what we're going to start with, today's featured artist is going to be Dio Wings from Korea, and this is their new single, the newest single that came out on 3/16. This song is The Way to Go. Go ahead, check that out. Also, the second song from Bach from the Paper Music Associates in Korea, that's featuring Hannah Kim from DC, all the way over there in America, and that song is A Flower. And last but not least, we have Mariah Henry from America, and this song is the one I use always for the Sunday edition, but we'll listen to the full song. Great song, one of my favorites of hers. Is called Universe. All right, guys, so make sure, if anything else, during this time, we are setting another prayer condition that we will keep these member artists in our prayers so that they will explode and blow up and make amazing things happen. All right, guys, so let us support and listen to our amazing member artists from around the world.
힘들었던 지난 날은 모두 잊어요. 그마저도 가치 있게 내 디딘 걸음이었으니 아파 흘렸던 눈물보다 희망으로 기다렸던 빛나는 순간을 기억해. 그려진 기억도 짙어진 추억도 모두 다 빛나는 걸. 다 똑같아 보여도 저마다 사연이 달라. 너의 얘기를 들려줘요. 너와 나 갈 길은 끝에서 끝까지 가다가 아니 갈 때면 차라리 아니 떠나만 못하리라. 노래하고 춤추고 아기자기 얘기 나누고 우리 갈 길은 비바람 스치고 눈보라 친데도 This is the way to go. It's my way. Go straight up. It's my way. This is the way to go. 이래저래 시끄럽던 모든 말들은 하나면 충분하니까
살다 보면 빠져버려 그러다 너도 버려 쓸데없는 건 갖다 버려버려 수실로 머릿속 청소 잘해야지 평소에 한 개 있디 한 개 더요 This is the way to go
너와 나 갈 길은 극에서 끝까지 가다가 아니 갈 테면 차라리 아니 떠나만 못하리라 노래하고 춤추고 아기자기 얘기 나누고 우리 갈 길은 비바람 스치고는 멀어진대도 This is the way to go 너와 나 갈 길은 처음부터 끝까지 가다가 아니 갈 테면 차라리 아니 떠나만 못하리라 노래하고 춤추고 아기자기 얘기 나누고 우리 갈 길은 비바람 스치고는 몰아친대도 This is the way to go
추운 날 비추인 햇살 하늘 아래 깨어난 한 송이 아득했던 밤 하늘 속 바라던 이 맘도 눈앞에 이뤄진 걸 작은 하나의 씨앗에서 자란다 바위와 흙 속에서 지냈던 시간 많은 시련과 아픈 기억들도 이젠 하나의 선으로 그려졌나
It's a beautiful day It's a beautiful day It's a beautiful day I know what you feel inside Oh flower I know you're the most beautiful flower in the world Oh flower I know you're the most beautiful flower in the world
아름다운 시간 속에서 살아가는 꽃 한 송이 하늘 아래 깨어나 웃음 짓네 그 환한 웃음으로 늘 인사하네 어떤 바람에도 햇살과 함께하는 모습 한결같은 마음을 잊지 않는 모습 진심으로 모든 걸 대하는 하얀 송이의 꽃이네
It's a beautiful day flower It's a beautiful day It's a beautiful day I know what you feel inside Oh flower I know you're the most beautiful flower in the world Oh flower I know you're the most beautiful flower in the world
따스한 햇살 아래서 함께하는 행복한 순간에 맺혀있던 눈물을 잠시 내려놓고 shake.
활짝 핀 꽃처럼 웃는다. 활짝 핀 꽃처럼 웃는다.
아름다운 시간 속에서 살아가는 꽃 한 송이.
When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. Never thought that living could be easy, so you taught me right from wrong. Now I'm free to be full of love, full of hope. I'm empty of all things. I'm living to make everyone come follow me. This is a life worth living that I know. If I love someone else, what would he give me though? It's like I'm floating on clouds, my feet don't touch the ground. Life with you is like heaven, look at what I found. You said believe in me, don't change and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. You said believe in me, don't change and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best, I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world, in my hands the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. It's yours, can't escape from the love, it's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe.
And there it is. It is Mariah Henry from America, and that song is Universe. And of course, that's a song I use for the Sunday editions, but now you can hear the full song, and it is a great song too. Second song was Bach from the Paper Music Associates in Korea. That's featuring Hannah Kim, and that song is A Flower. And the featured artist of the day is once again Dio Wings from Korea, and the song is The Way to Go. It's a song made from one of Sunseem's poems, and it is a single that debuted on 3/16 this year. All right, guys, so let's get into some updates going on for today. It is Tuesday, and let's see what's going around the world, starting with the coronavirus updates. In the world, 131.7 million cases with 2.8 million deaths. Great news, guys. The world mortality rate went down 0.01%, which is huge, right? Because we're talking at the large scale, so even 0.01% is a big thing. The U.S., top 6 countries going by daily infection rates. We have the U.S., 31.3 million cases, 568,000 deaths at 1.81%. Brazil in second, as always, 12.9 million cases, 330,000 deaths. And their mortality rate goes up again for a third day straight. India, 12.5 million cases, 165,000 deaths at 1.31%. Italy comes into the top 6 once again with 3.6 million cases, 111,000 deaths at 3.03%. Turkey, 3.4 million cases, 32,000 deaths at 0.93%. And Poland rounds up the top 6, 2.4 million cases, 54,000 deaths at 2.25%. Sweden, one of the only countries not to go into a full lockdown, is at 1.66%, and then Belgium at 2.58%. Let's take a look also now at the daily infection rates. And this is kind of telling. It shows you how countries are doing with the spread and social distancing and whatnot. We'll start off with India. India's on top for 2 days straight. I actually didn't think they would, but they're 2 days straight on top. 92,000 cases in a single day. The U.S. in second was 66,000, and then Turkey with 44,000. Yes, not Brazil, guys. It's Turkey in third with 44,000 cases. Brazil drops to 41,000 cases in a day. Poland with 28, and then Italy rounds at the top 6 for daily infection rates with 21,000 cases in a day. Now, over here in Southeast Asia, the Philippines is still in the 5 digits. It is 12,000 cases in a day. Indonesia with 4,300, and Malaysia over here staying steady around 1,600 cases in a single day. So let's get into the top 3 news going on around the world. We're going to start with Indonesia, way over here in Southeast Asia. We're going to take a look at Indonesia and East Timor. And 70 people died because there's flash floods and landslides in these areas. So at least 71 people have died after flash floods and landslides hit Indonesia and East Timor on Sunday. Torrential rain sparked widespread destruction in the Southeast Asian neighbors, with water from overflowing dams submerging thousands of homes. Now, the affected area stretched from the islands in the eastern Indonesia all the way to East Timor, and more than 40 people are still missing in Indonesia, and officials warned the death toll could rise further. At one point, before we got the 70 deaths, they said there are 55 dead, but the number is very dynamic and will definitely change, while some 42 people are still missing. So we're up to 71 right now. And that was from Indonesia. And the mud and the extreme weather have become a serious challenge, and the debris piling up has hampered the search and rescue teams. Now, they are suspecting many people are buried. Sorry, I'm thinking very Canadian style. Many people are buried, but it's not clear how many are missing. Right, so the evacuees are spread out, and there are hundreds in each sub-district, but many others are staying at home. They need medicine, food, and blankets, and at least 21 people have also died in East Timor, also known as Timor-Leste. Now, many of the victims are believed to be from the country's capital called Dili, and Indonesian President Widodo has offered his condolences and urged people to follow the advice from officials during extreme weather periods. And they've ordered disaster relief efforts to be conducted quickly and well. And, for example, for health service assistance, availability of logistics, and basic needs for the displaced, and the reparation of infrastructure. So landslides, flash floods are not uncommon across the Indonesian archipelago. Archipelago, is that how you say it? Archipelago? Gosh, I've heard this word I've learned in like high school, the archipelago. Okay, during the rainy season. So this landslides and flash floods not uncommon, and in January this year too, 40 people died from flash floods that hit a town also in Java. So last September, at least 11 people were killed in landslides on Borneo, while a few months earlier, dozens died in a place called Sulawesi. So the country's disaster agency has estimated that nearly half of the country's population, about 125 million people, live in parts of the country that are at risk of landslides. So that is the first news today, all the way over there in Indonesia. We have members over there in the church there, so let's make sure to pray for them. Second news is about France. So France enters a third national lockdown amid ICU surge. So France has entered its third national lockdown as it battles a surge in cases of the coronavirus that threatens to overwhelm the country's hospitals. So all schools, non-essential shops will shut for 4 weeks, and a curfew will be in place from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And on Friday, the number of seriously ill coronavirus patients in intensive care units in the ICU increased by 145, and that is the biggest jump in 5 months. The President, Macron, has promised more hospital beds for the COVID patients, and France is currently battling a peak of about 5,000 patients in the ICUs, and on Friday, the country recorded almost 47,000 new cases and 304 deaths. And as well as the restrictions that came into force on Saturday, from Tuesday, people will also need a valid reason to travel more than 10 kilometers from their homes. And President Macron had hoped to keep France's coronavirus cases under control without having to impose another lockdown. However, the country has suggested the country has struggled with an EU-wide delay in the vaccine rollout, as well as several new strains of the virus. So what's happening to the rest of Europe? Well, in Germany, the president, Steinmeier, called on people to play their part and get vaccinated. And speaking in television address to the nation on Saturday, he said the country was in the middle of a third wave and that it faced more restrictions. And he also admitted that mistakes had been made, specifically in testing and in the vaccine rollout, and talked about there being a crisis of trust in the state, right? Last month, German officials announced that the country would be placed in a strict Easter lockdown, only to reverse the decision just days later. And of course, the German Chancellor Merkel called the plan for a lockdown from April 1st to 5th, and they called that a mistake and said she took ultimate responsibility for the U-turn. Italy has also entered a strict 3-day lockdown on Saturday in order to try to prevent a surge in coronavirus cases over the Easter weekend, and all regions are now in the red zone, the highest tier of restrictions, as the country records about 20,000 new cases a day. Non-essential movement is banned, but people are allowed to have an Easter meal in their homes with 2 others. Churches are also open too, but worshippers are being told to attend services within their regions. And Pope Francis delivered his Easter message to a scaled-back group of about 200 people at the St. Peter's Square. And, of course, the square itself was empty for a second year, and different regions will remain in either orange or red zone restrictions until the end of the month. So the Italian government also announced it was placing 70,000 extra police officers on surveillance nationwide in order to enforce the lockdown rules. And basically they're saying it's not a time to lower their guard or to let go of the sense of responsibility. They are, it looks like these more lockdowns are happening right now. Vaccinations have been super slow in Europe, for those of you guys don't know. On Friday, the WHO even criticized Europe's unacceptably slow vaccine rollout and said the situation in the region is now worse than it has been in several months, right? Because, the vaccines present the best way out of the pandemic. So that is the second news. And the last but not least, we're going to go to Israel. And the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, his corruption trial is going to hear their first witnesses. So the PM Netanyahu's corruption trial is to resume, with the court in Jerusalem overseeing it due to hear evidence for the first time. So Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's 71, is accused of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in connection with 3 separate cases, and he formally pleaded not guilty to the charges at a hearing in February. And his trial has been delayed several times because of the coronavirus-related restrictions in last month's general election, in which it was a key issue, this trial. So the election failed to end the deadlock that has plagued Israeli politics for the last 2 years. And Mr. Netanyahu's right-wing bloc and the parties opposed to him are both currently short of a majority in parliament. And the president, Rivlin, will consult party leaders this week, then nominate who he thinks has the best chance of forming a new coalition government. And of course, Netanyahu's rivals fear that if he remains PM, he will push through legislation that would grant him immunity from prosecution while in office. And of course, he's rejecting such a claim. So those of you guys don't know, what is this prime minister accused of? He's been indicted in 3 cases, right? They're known as, the cases are known as 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000. I'm not sure why it is, but in case 1,000, it's fraud and breach of trust, and he's accused of receiving gifts, mainly cigars and bottles of champagne from powerful businessmen in exchange for favors. Case 2,000 is fraud and breach of trust, where he's accused of offering to help improve the circulation of Israeli newspaper in exchange for positive coverage. And the last one is case 4,000, which is bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Because as Prime Minister and Minister of Communications at the time of the alleged offense, Mr. Netanyahu is accused of promoting regulatory decisions favorable to the controlling shareholder in the Bezek telecom giant, right? So, and in exchange for positive coverage. Right, so that's what's kind of going on. That's what he's being charged for, and it is now back on. Of course, Mr. Netanyahu has denied all charges, and he's branding everything as a witch hunt, right? And the one question people ask is, how can the prime minister serve and stand on trial at the same time? So he is presumed innocent unless proven otherwise, and there is currently no legal barrier to him staying in office as prime minister in the country. So there's no legal barrier to that. So that's why he's able to do it. But if he's convicted, he would not be required to step down until the appeals process is exhausted, something that could take years, right? So even if he gets convicted, and there's an appeal, he doesn't have to step down till all the appeals are done, which, like they said, could take years, right? So a former prime minister of Israel, his name is Olmer. He stepped down as his party's leader when he was under investigation for corruption in 2008, but technically remained in office until elections the following year. Polls which brought, and then basically this is which brought Netanyahu to power, right? So this old prime minister was eventually convicted of bribery, fraud, and obstruction of justice, and breach of trust in connection with several cases, and then he served 16 months of a 27-month prison sentence. So it's kind of like they have a history of this over there in Israel with their political leaders. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. So that is the top 3 current news that's going on right now at the moment, which means it's time for us to go a little bit more spiritual, right? We need some spirituality right now. So we're going to sing a couple songs. We're going to start with the Tower of Love, and then Everything God Has Given, and then we'll end it with the oldie but goodie and powerful song is My Life. All right, guys. So as one body of the Morning Star Drive, let us make sure to give glory, honor, and praise to the Holy Trinity.
Flashing like light as you act upon His word. You are His love, now let's celebrate. Now that we've raptured, we'll rejoice for 1,000 years. 'Cause our Lord's with us today. He's with us now, so let's live without regrets. Just as you loved Him, just as you ran, putting everything on the line. People of this history, oh my brothers, you have returned. You people who have received the Holy Spirit's fire, when you heard heaven's word of life, you who said amen, you who set your minds, you who told Him that you would never leave. Now the Lord sets us ablaze. Now heaven's love burns ever stronger inside our hearts. Our Lord's enraptured by the love our God is showing right now. you would go until the end with Him. As you preach this fiery word to all the world, preaching with the Lord's burning heart, how are you living? What's your position in front of heaven now? Lord, you're eternal. We are your lovers, your brides. As you preach this fiery word to all the world, preaching with the Lord's burning heart, how are you living? What's your position in front of heaven now? Lord, you're eternal. We are your lovers, your brides. For 1,000 years we'll rejoice. Our love will never end. Our love will never end. Our love will never end.
and I carry 1,000 years of hopes and dreams in this boat with me, knowing that someday they'll come to be. I am more than words, I bring them to life. More than words alone, I speak through deeds. Although my eyes and body are small, I can understand both this world and the next. I see everything, my hands and feet are hands and feet of fire. They're more than I can use in just one life. I'll live without regret. Yes, I will use my life for my family, nation, the world. For more than just myself, I'll live for heaven's will. I will live for God without regret. I carry 1,000 years of hopes and dreams in this boat with me, knowing that someday they'll come to be. I am more than words, I bring them to life. More than words alone, I speak through deeds. Although my eyes and body are small, I can understand both this world and the next. I see everything, my hands and feet are hands and feet of fire. They're more than I can use in just one life. I'll live without regret. Yes, I will use my life for my family, nation, the world. For more than just myself, I'll live for heaven's will. I will live for God without regret. I'll live without regret. Yes, I will use my life for my family, nation, the world. For more than just myself, I'll live for heaven's will. I will live for God without regret. I will live for God without regret. I will live for God without regret.
And there it is. That was My Life. Before that was Everything God Has Given and The Tower of Love. Hope you guys enjoyed that time of praise and worship, giving glory to the Holy Trinity. All right, guys. So it is Tuesday, which means our word study today is going to be on the Bible. And we're going to talk about, especially this week's scriptures, we're looking into the book of Deuteronomy. So a lot of us know that the book of Deuteronomy is in the first 5 books, or in other words, they call it the law. right? Or for the Jewish people, it's the Pentateuch. And this is the fifth book, the final book. And it's very, very interesting because, well, we know it's written by Moses, but of course we know that it can't all be written by Moses because it talks about his death and before everything even finishes of the first 5 books. But a couple interesting things. The name Deuteronomy it has several meanings. I believe one of them is the second law or repeated law. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit more deeply. But Deuteronomy, another name that they call this book, which is great for this week's message, Deuteronomy has also been called the Book of Remembrance, right? Which is very, very, in line with this week's message about remembering the past, what God has done for us. And they also call it Moses' Upper Desert Discourse, right? And interesting thing is, the book of Deuteronomy, it only covers a time frame of 1 month, right? That's the time frame about which this book covers. And this is when the Israelites are camped in the plains of Moab. And it's kind of like a book. It's like, it's the last of the 5. And it is like Moses' a series of farewell messages by Moses to his people. And he's basically telling the people that just as the law of Moses had been given to the generation of the Exodus, it must now be repeated in giving it to the generations to come, right? So let's go a little bit deeper into the book of Deuteronomy. Now, of course, Deuteronomy is the English title, okay? So in Hebrew, for the Pentateuch or the Septuagint, this 2nd century BC translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, the title that means second law, and the reason it was called second law is from a misunderstanding from Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 18, where the meaning of it actually means a copy of the law. So Deuteronomy, you can organize into 3 parts. They're like 3 discourses, okay, from Moses. And it also has a concluding addendum. Right, so his final words given to the Hebrews as they prepared to enter the land of Canaan, these are what the 120-year-old Moses was giving to them. And these words recall the past activities of God in order to build identity for the present community. And, that's why it's perfect for this week's message. It's recalling the past of what God has done. People will build an identity for the present community, and then the people are then called to continued faithfulness in the future based on that communal identity. So if you look at the 3 different discourses or the 3 areas, 3 series, right? So there's 3 discourses plus a final addendum. So the first discourse, which is like chapters 1 to 4, and it basically summarizes the events between the encounter with God at Mount Sinai and the encampment in Moab, where they are right now, followed by an urgent appeal for faithfulness to God. Then the second discourse, which goes from chapter 5 to 28, it recounts the giving of the 10 words or the 10 commandments at Sinai. And this is followed by an explanation of the first commandment centered around the Shema, right? That's in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. And in Hebrew, the word means hear. And it's an extended appeal to remain faithful to God in spite of the temptations that will come in the new land. And that's why it's based on the first commandment, which is thou shalt have no other gods, right? And that's why Moses is telling everyone to remain faithful to God. And the specific instruction in the communal life begins in chapter 12, concluding with the covenant ceremony. And it's focusing on their responsibilities to God and each other. Now, the third discourse would be from chapter 29 and 30, and basically that encapsulates the first 2 with the historical review, a covenant renewal, and admonitions to faithfulness and warnings of the consequences of disobedience. And then finally the conclusion, which is obviously chapters 31 to 34. It includes instructions concerning Moses' successor, final instructions and liturgies, and the song and blessings of Moses and his death, right? So when you look at even like the opening verses of Deuteronomy from chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, it's very, very interesting. So let's go back to the very, very beginning. Chapter 1, verse 1 through 5 are connected directly with the closing verses of the book of Numbers, right? And it establishes a setting for the entire book, which is in the plains of Moab after the Hebrews left the wilderness, right? So Deuteronomy provides both kind of like a literary plus a theological place between the grace of God manifested in the Exodus, Sinai, the wilderness, and the ensuing failure of the people to remain faithful to God, seen in the traditions relating to the settlement in the land. So the community understood the importance of these words in calling the people to obedience at such specific, crucial junctures in Israel's history. And at the same time, the words function dynamically in addressing the ongoing need of the people for religious, social, and cultural identity. So traditionally, the entire book of Deuteronomy has been attributed to Moses, but like I said before, it's kind of weird that you have your own death written in there, which means there's someone else helping you write it also. So some people are saying that it could be Joshua, who was his successor, that was writing some of it too. We're not sure exactly who it is though. But we see that, even does that mean that Joshua was writing from his death and on? But think about it. If Joshua was helping, we don't know when and where he was doing it. So it doesn't preclude the possibility that some of the core parts of the book, maybe even large portions of it, doesn't come from Moses. Right? It's possible, right? But everyone's under the assumption that most of it was written from Moses, except obviously for the parts after his death, right? So Deuteronomy, if you think to yourself, is not a book of laws. It is more of it's a book of the heart, and it's instruction in how to live intentionally as God's people in response to God's love and mercy towards them. And one of the most important features of the book is it shows the commandments, and they're not presented in legal format, but are cast in the style of a sermon, right? So it's interwoven with pleas and exhortations to obedience, and it's grounded in the initiating grace of God. And also the concept of covenant around which the book revolves is not primarily a legal concept, but a cultural way of expressing relationship between God and his people. Right? So there is a call to obedience throughout the entire book of Deuteronomy, and there's an appeal to order all of life in relation to God, who had revealed himself in their history as a true and living God. And it's not just it's kind of a call for people to choose God, right? Look at all God has done for us. Look what God has done for us, so you need to call and choose God yourself. Right, and there's a lot of practical instruction in the book of Deuteronomy, and the emphasis is about intentional and joyful obedience of the heart as the proper response to God's grace. Right, so it's really, really deep, guys. Intentional and joyful obedience. Okay, and it's about the proper response to God's grace is more about the responsibility of the individual. Right? And, it's about the motive and intentions, right, that has been advocated by Moses. So the Deuteronomy develops the idea that obedience brings blessing in life and disobedience brings curses and death, right? And a way of affirming the positive results of life properly ordered under God. While that view would later be distorted, Deuteronomy itself stresses obedience on the level of proper love. Right, and you'll find that in chapter 10. And there is concern expressed throughout the book that the people will fail, and it's probably reflecting a later time when Israel had already failed too. So it's a very, very interesting book. I hope you guys got a little bit more from this today on the book of Deuteronomy, and that we'll continue more and more to really be able to understand the history of the Bible, the book that we believe as the book of life, the words of life that bring salvation. So this is something that we should know really well too. Okay, so that is today's study on the book of Deuteronomy. Hope you guys learned a little bit more of this. All right, cool. Which means we're going to go into the song of choice for today. And I did a little bit of this last week, but I'm going into these old Korean pop songs where everything began all the way in the 90s. And we're going to go into a group called Clone, right? And it's like fun music more than anything else. I remember listening to them during the World Cup. And this song, just hearing the name will be like, what? What does that mean? It's called Gungtari Shabara. Yeah, you're like, what? That's the name of the song, right? An old Korean group from the 90s called Clone. They did dance music and this really fun music. So I hope you guys enjoy this. This is old Korean music, pop music, K-pop when it first came out. This is from a group called Clone, and it's called Gungtari Shabara.
기쁨과 슬픔이 엇갈리고 좌절과 용기가 교차되고 만나가 이별을 나누면서 이렇게 우린 살아가고 뜻대로 되지 않을 때도 있고 환복은 될 때도 있어 다 그런 누구나 나는 이렇게 돌아가니까 다 그렇게 사는 거야 길이가 엇갈리는 세상 속에서 내일이 다시 찾아오기에 우리는 희망을 안고 사는 거야
마음대로 일이 되지 않을 때 하던 일을 멈추고 여행을 떠나봐 바다를 찾아가 소리를 질러봐 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠빠 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠 빠빠빠빠빠빠빠빠 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠 빠빠빠빠빠빠빠빠 우울한 날이 계속 이어질 땐 신나는 음악에 신나게 춤을 춰봐 나처럼 이렇게 리듬에 맞춰 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠빠 누구나 괴로운 일은 있는 것 한 가지 생각에 너무 집착하지 마 그럴 땐 나처럼 툭툭 들면서 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠빠 기쁨과 슬픔이 엇갈리고 좌절과 용기가 교차되고 만남과 이별 나누면서 그렇게 우린 살아가고 뜻대로 되지 않을 때도 있고 맘먹은 대로 될 때도 있어 다 그런 건 누구나 세상은 그렇게 돌아가니까
그렇게 사는 거야 길이가 엇갈리는 세상 속에서 내일이 다시 찾아오기에 우리는 희망을 안고 사는 거야
마음대로 일이 되지 않을 때 하던 일을 멈추고 여행을 떠나봐 바다를 찾아가 소리를 질러봐 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠빠 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠 빠빠빠빠빠빠빠 다리 샤바라 빠빠빠 빠빠빠빠빠빠빠
What a fun song. What a crazy song, right? So I hope you guys really enjoyed that. That is old school Korean K-pop. Yeah, if you guys see I'll leave the link in the description. If you see the video, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so like old school, right? And the song is just a really fun song more than anything else. So can you imagine during the World Cup, this song going on, everyone just jumping around and dancing? Oh, it was great. Either way, so that is Clone with Kumtari Shabara. And that moves us into the last section for today. And of course, today is Tuesday. What does that mean, guys? We're going to go into the best class ever with Sean Jusung McMillan.
Thousands of years ago, Socrates told us, know thyself. But this turns out to be much harder than we might have thought. If we look at the brain, it doesn't appear to be just one, but possibly two brains. And ourselves too. Are we really just one person? Or are we multiple personalities all fighting for control over this one person moving through space called you? My name is Sean Jung-Ju-Song McMillan, and this is the best class ever. I first became interested in left and right brain thinking when I read the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. This book was interesting because it was able to discern why people have such a hard time learning to draw better than kindergartners. It argued that students were using the parts of the brain that we use in all of our other classes, the parts of the brain that process language, listening, reading, and writing. Language takes very complicated concepts and turns them into a library of very simple symbols. Letters, words, icons, symbols, and stick figures take an extraordinarily sophisticated idea and turn them into something that you can draw abstractly as 3 to 4 lines. These parts of the brain that become active when we use language are typically found on the left side of the brain. But a large part of the brain is dedicated to processing visuals. In fact, when we participate in activities that deal with spatial reasoning like drawing, these parts of the brains are typically active on the right side of the brain. Exploring the world and taking in all of the insane amount of visual data to find which parts we should focus on and how it relates to everything else we see is a very important skill. We use these skills to navigate the world, to drive, to move through the world, and to map out the world. As an art teacher, I found my students weren't really able to look at the world and draw it as they actually saw it. They would look at a cardboard three-dimensional box and draw it as a simple square. A 3D box has 6 sides, 3 of which you can actually see at any given time. But in kindergarten, we learned to label and memorize these sophisticated images as simple graphic representations. Think of those simple alphabet flashcards. A is for apple. And you see an apple as a flat, irregular red circle with a stem and maybe a dark green leaf. The problem is when I show my high school students a real apple, they don't even look at the apple. They just draw a symbol representation of an apple. And then they get embarrassed because they don't draw any better than they did when they were in kindergarten. This is the left side of your brain saying, I know a simple shortcut for drawing apples. But art is not about knowing. It's about seeing without knowing. I tell my art students over and over again, draw what you see, not what you know. Draw what you actually see, not what you think you know. So how do we shut up the left part of your brain that thinks it knows? How do I force my students to draw using the right part of the brain, the part that actually sees and takes in all of that visual input? I put up complicated images and I ask my students to draw them, but first I turn the image upside down. This way, your brain cannot easily label it as just an item or a thing. Labels are language. Language, symbols, and labels oversimplify things. Observational drawing, not drawing out of your head, but drawing what you actually see, is the art of appreciating all of nature's beautiful complications and recording your own unique perception of it. It is the art of seeing the world afresh and inspiring others to see it in a new way. When you see a painting of a flower, it's so much more than just a flower. It's a combination of color, form, light, shadow, and an interplay of shapes. It's the details the artist chose to render, and the lack of details in the parts of the image the artist chose to ignore. A unique filter of perception. But there is an even crazier aspect of having 2 separate hemispheres of the brain. These 2 brains are connected through the corpus callosum, a large C-shaped nerve fiber bundle found beneath the cerebral cortex. In some extreme cases, where patients were having constant epileptic seizures, doctors found that they could reduce the number of seizures by cutting the corpus callosum. In these cases, there was absolutely no connection between the patient's left and right hemispheres of the brain. Now remember, the parts of your brain that light up when you speak in complicated sentences are all contained within the left hemisphere of the brain. You should also know that the left side of your body is controlled by the right hemisphere, and the right side of your body is controlled by the left hemisphere. Since this is the case, we can close the left eye and show something only to the right brain. We can also close your right eye and show something only to your left brain. In the patients with no corpus callosum to pass information from one side of the brain to the other, we could show the word B-A-L-L, ball, to the right brain, and then ask the patient about it. The patient would respond that they did not see anything at all. This response, of course, came from the left brain, which had not seen the word. But then, if we give the patient several objects to choose from and ask them to choose which item they had seen, they would reach for and grab the ball. So the right brain can read the word ball, but it cannot express this using complicated sentences. They showed these patients one image to the left brain and a different image to the right brain. For instance, we might show a photo of a house covered in snow to the right brain and a chicken's foot to the left brain. Then they asked the patient to point to the image related to what they saw. The hand controlled by the right brain would point to the snow shovel, while the hand controlled by the left brain would simultaneously point to the chicken. Now it gets interesting. They would ask the patient why they pointed to the snow shovel. Remember that the left brain never saw the snow-related image, And because their two brains are disconnected, it really cannot know why the left hand, controlled by the right brain, pointed at the image of a snow shovel. But only the left brain is able to express itself using full sentences. The patients all came up with reasons for why they had pointed to the image of the snow shovel. I think because maybe you use a snow shovel to clean a chicken house? The left brain really didn't know why, but it never admitted to this. Instead, it just made up a plausible story to explain it away. While this may seem surprising, I'm sure if you think about it, you have probably done this 1,000 times. We don't really know why we do what we do, but that doesn't make us any less likely to make up some logic and justify it afterwards. These patients could also draw two totally different images with each hand simultaneously, a form of multitasking that most of us are incapable of. For the most part, these patients were able to function totally normally, but there were certain instances where their daily behaviors became really weird. Sometimes when trying to choose what to wear, they would grab a shirt with one hand and then the other hand would throw it away. There were times when a person's arms were totally in conflict with one another. And when asked to explain why, the person would always just make up a reason to explain any behavior that only their right brain had participated in. CGP Grey has a great video that illustrates this experiment really well, which I will provide a link to on the site. In the ancient philosophy of Taoism, the world is seen abstractly as divided up into yin and yang, chaos and order. This is represented by the black and white circular symbol found in the center of the Korean flag. These two curved teardrop shapes, one black with a white dot at its center, and the other white with a black dot at its center, these two dance around each other, compelled by centrifugal force. It's really an amazing graphic with deep psychological and philosophical significance. It represents the duality of the world and the balance between its two forces. The world is often divided up into two counterbalancing forces, male and female, dark and light, war and peace, tension and release. There is a time to gather and a time to scatter, a time to sow and a time to reap. In the West, we often tend to think in terms of good and evil, labeling one side as good and the other as bad. But Taoism focuses more on the necessity of both. Again, it comes down to chaos and order. Now, broadly speaking, the two hemispheres could be seen as correlated with chaos and order. The right brain, which is good at exploring large visual data sets and charting new pathways through confusing information, can be seen as good at handling chaos. Once this new path is tread over and over again, it can be categorized, simplified, and reduced to a simple pattern of muscle memory, words or symbols. It becomes easy to store away into our library of language. This is order. Like a library of books, language, sentences, words, letters, and symbols all perfectly placed onto shelves where every subject has its place. This could be easily seen as the left brain which handles language. Too much chaos is not good, as we could easily get lost and overwhelmed. But too much order is also not good. At first, we find comfort in the familiarity, but eventually it becomes boring and possibly even obsolete as the world changes around us. So we need both. We need a time to adventure out and discover something new, and a time to retreat and synthesize what we have learned. Even if you are not artistically inclined or interested in becoming an artist, I highly recommend drawing lessons as a way to quiet your inner voice. It has a very calming effect that allows you to focus for long periods of time. It's almost like the perfect distraction. Like playing a game, doing a puzzle, or filling a coloring book, it allows you to lose track of time and get into the zone, which is very satisfying while also developing your visual spatial intelligence. For anyone who would like to try the drawing exercises I mentioned earlier, I have a free lesson which I will provide in the show notes on www.bestclassever.org.
And thank you so much, Sean Jusung McMillan, for another awesome episode of The Best Class Ever. Learning more and more stuff. And, I know Sean really well. Me and Jusung go back. And he is someone well-versed. He reads a ton of stuff. So I hope you guys really learned a lot from that, too. That was Best Class Ever with Sean Jusung McMillan. Which means we come to the end of today's podcast. Hope you guys had an amazing time together on this Tuesday. Which means that, yes, It is done, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and